Hi everyone, it's the Ancient Baker. Today we're going to be making einkorn bread. Einkorn is an ancient grain, low in gluten, so it's easier to digest. If you're having issues with gluten bothering your stomach, some people turn to einkorn, Einkorn. I'm using the whole wheat flour. They also have an all-purpose flour. The ratio of water to flour is a little different with the all-purpose. I'll post that in the notes because I'm going to be doing the measurements for the whole wheat flour. They taste the exact same. There's very little difference. It's just they removed some of the husk for the all-purpose, and I just like to keep everything in. So we're going to start today. This is actually really quick. There's no kneading involved. It's because it's low gluten, it doesn't like to be touched a lot. The higher the gluten, the more you have to knead bread. So the lower the gluten, the less you even do anything with it. So you're really just mixing and then leaving and it'll rise. I have here, let's get started. Before you even start measuring stuff out or gathering what you need, grab your water and start your yeast. That way it's blooming. Now I'm using active dry yeast, so I will add it to some warm water. If you're using instant yeast, you really don't even need to do this step, so that's one step faster. So I have 1 cup of warm water. Now you want 120 degrees. 120 degrees, if you don't have a thermometer, it just, you touch it and you probably wouldn't put the baby or the kids in this water. Well, the kids, definitely not the baby. But you could still tolerate it. But you wanted to have a little bit of kick there because that'll really wake the yeast up. So I am going to add to this 2 teaspoons of yeast and a 1/4 cup of honey. 1/4 cup. Plop that in. I'm going to use my teaspoon. Just scoop it out. There you go. And then I'll cover that. See how it looks right now? That's the before. I'm going to take my cloth and cover it just to hold in the warm water, or the warmth from the water. It's just something I do. Now, while that is doing its thing and blooming, I'm going to talk to you now about setting things up. Like I said, once you're good at this, it goes pretty quickly. I like to use a food scale because then I know exactly what I'm doing. I find it tricky to measure with measuring cups, especially flour, because it could come out different every time. So we are going to need 400 grams of our whole wheat einkorn. So I will show you. Now in cups, as far as cups, that's 3 cups. 400 grams. Went a little over, so just use this, scoop a little bit out. If you don't have a food scale, I would definitely suggest getting one. We use ours so often, it's just really crazy all the times we can use it. Now, we're going to add to this a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to then check our yeast and see how it's looking. So far in here, we've got our 400 grams of einkorn. We've got our teaspoon of salt. Over here, we've got the 1 cup of warm to hot water, 2 teaspoons of yeast, and a 1/4 cup of honey. Okay, let's go ahead and check our yeast. I've actually paused filming and waited about 3 additional minutes. And as you can see, it's kind of starting to foam and froth at the top. And that shows you that it is good. So, and what I'm almost forgetting, my olive oil. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons of olive oil right into our yeast. There you go. So in Okay, and I also want to tell you, this is a Danish dough hook. It's helpful for when you're first mixing before you get to the hand kneading part. Fun little gadget. Do you need it? No. But it's nice to have. If you've got a spoon, works good too. And we're going to go ahead and mix this now. I like to go in a circle, slowly grabbing more more flour as I go around. That way I'm not working it too much. You really can't even overwork it. It's fine. You're just going to mix it all, combine it all. It's coming together. You could see how the Danish dough hook, it kind of presses it through. So it almost acts like you're stretching and you're kneading it, because that's when you're kneading the dough, you're stretching it. And that's what activates the gluten. So the dough hook kind of helps you get that initiated, especially with this sort of bread where you aren't going to knead it. And it's going to be too sticky to knead anyway. If you could see the consistency, it's very sticky. So it's totally different from other breads. I'm going to show you, what it looks like when it's baked and everything, so you can kind of see what you'll get in the end. So this looks good. That's really all you're going to do. So when you get really good at making this bread, you can literally 5 minutes and you've got it mixed up. What we're going to do now is I'm going to cover it and I'm going to I put it on the porch because it's hot right now and it's the perfect environment for proofing bread. The other day I posted a video about proofing bread in a chilly environment. So that would be in the oven. So I will note that in this video in the top corner. So if you need to refer to that quickly, you can. But I'm going to cover this now, just like this. You're not doing anything fancy. You're not touching it. You don't have to do anything. You're going to cover it now, and we're going to put it in a warm environment for about an hour. So this is what it looks like now. And I will show you what it looks like when it's risen. At that point, we're going to put it in our loaf pan, and then we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes. It'll come up, it'll rise even more, and then we pop it in the oven. So all together, it ends up being a 2-hour process. And you can even leave this bread rising for hours. I've forgotten it for at least 5 hours. And I go back and it's fine. It's not like regular all-purpose or whole wheat where you've got a little window where it could deflate and then it's no good. This is very forgiving. So I'm going to put this outside and then we'll return and see what it looks like when it's risen. Okay, so let's go ahead now and see what our dough looks like after it has risen. It's been about an hour and 15 minutes since I put mine in, covered it to rise. Let's see what we have here. Doesn't look anything like our traditional dough, so don't worry if it could be a little bit disconcerting if you look at it and you're expecting your typical white flour loaf. Now, what I have over here is my 8.5 by 11 loaf pan with my parchment. You don't have to do this step. It's just easy to get it out. I have I did a little rectangle piece of parchment and I wet it a little bit. It makes it very easy to mold. Otherwise, it keeps wanting to pop out. Still, it's even a little tricky. Put a little oil in the parts, even on the parchment. Can never get your dough out easy enough. We're still going to have to work it out a little bit, but not as much. Now I'm going to I find working with a little spatula is really good because I can flatten it and it makes a pretty loaf that way. You could do this with your hands. And just put it right in to your loaf pan. Now this is going to sit again for about 30 minutes and you'll see it'll rise even more. And I just kind of pat it down, move it into the corners. I do this all the time. You don't have to be too gentle with it or anything. I like this, gives you a nice uniform loaf. If you want a rustic loaf, you don't do this. It all tastes the same. Okay, so that looks good. Now, I'm going to cover it again. And I'm going to put it outside. And then at that point, I'll show you what it looks like when it's risen a little bit more. You can kind of see where we're at right now. And I'll show you what we look like after about 30 minutes, and then we'll pop it in the oven. Okay, so here is our einkorn loaf. Just want to show you how it's risen. Now, one thing I do want to tell you is, and I forgot before, is if you have it covered, there's a possibility when you pull your towel off, you could pull the top layer and it deflates a little bit. It'll still bake fine. It's just a little upsetting. So I actually remembered that halfway through and took my towel off. So I wanted to tell you too. So we're going to pop this into a preheated 375 degree oven, 375 degrees for 35 minutes. I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do. Just put it right in. There you go. Close her up. Okay, and here is our last step. We just took the einkorn loaf out of the oven. And I'm going to show you how to get it out of the pan. I put it right onto a cooling rack, and the parchment's going to help us, but I'm also going to need a little help from a butter knife. That'll work the best. In theory, this is how it will work. And voila. Okay, and I just leave it right on the cooling rack for about 10 minutes. They say let it cool. I always cut into it when it's pretty warm and put some butter on it. And before I know it, half the loaf is gone because the kids have come by for a piece, and I have, and George has, so we enjoy it a lot. Now make sure that you like and subscribe to our video, because then when I do new videos, you'll get the updates. I'm going to do some buckwheat recipes and more einkorn and some spelt recipes, and all those are either low gluten or no gluten flours, ancient grains. Thank you for watching. This is the Ancient Baker.